You should think about your title as an advertisement for your essay. This is your first opportunity to get your audience's attention and make them interested in what you have to say. If you don't sell them on your idea with your title, there's a good chance they won't bother reading any further. At the most basic level, you want your title to at least be informative. It needs to communicate to your audience what your text is all about. However, you want to be careful to not just state the subject of the essay as the title, since that's not very intriguing. In addition to being informative, your title needs to engage your audience's interest. If you want to take your title to the next level, find inspiration in what you've written to help you craft a highly creative title as well. If your title is generated from your own creative inspiration, your audience is more likely to be inspired to read your writing. There are a few mistakes novice writers make when titling their writing. The first one is simply stating the subject of the essay as the title. If your essay is about social media, you'd be hard pressed to find a more boring or less inspirational title than social media. Using your thesis statement as your title might seem like a good alternative. After all, you want your title to state what the essay is about, right? While that's true, you don't want to give everything away before your audience reads a word of your essay. Your title really shouldn't be a complete sentence at all. Most titles are a word or a phrase, but not an entire sentence. So, what are you supposed to do? If you can't state your topic or your thesis statement, how can you create a good title? There are a lot of strategies you can draw on if you struggle to craft a creative title. Many titles use one or more of the following strategy. Your title might be a play on a popular expression. You don't want to simply copy someone else's words, but a creative play on a famous quote or idiom can work to get your reader's attention and convey a deeper significance to your essay subject matter. You can also use layered meanings, where the word or phrase you use as your title has multiple definitions that could apply to your topic in different ways. Making a comparison that seems contradictory at first can also be effective, especially if the point of your essay is to highlight the similarities between the contrasting ideas or to show how something negative is actually positive, or vice versa. Alliteration and rhyming are relatively simplistic techniques that some writers are opposed to, but advertisers rely on them all the time because audiences more easily remember them. So you might use them in your titles as well. If all else fails, the internet has proven the effectiveness of clickbait titles that rely heavily on shock and awe to grab audiences and get them to read an article they might otherwise have scrolled right past. Just be careful not to overuse this strategy or to take it to an extreme that might offend and therefore alienate your target audience. Let's look at some example titles. Chuck Klosterman, author of Fargo Rock City, and this book, Sex, Drugs, and Cocoa Puffs, uses a play on a popular expression for the title of his book, analyzing 90s pop culture. Most people readily recognize the similarities between his title, Sex, Drugs, and Cocoa Puffs, and the popular expression, Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. Gabriel Garcia Marquez uses a seeming contradiction by comparing two concepts that most people would view as contradictions. In Of Love and Other Demons, Marquez suggests that love, something typically viewed as positive, is one of many demons, something most people would view as evil. The Perks of Being a Wallflower uses a seeming contradiction strategy as well, but a little bit differently than Of Love and Other Demons. In American culture, being a wallflower an outside observer instead of an active participant, is frequently viewed as an undesirable trait. Um, American culture tends to place more emphasis and positive value on extroversion. But this title suggests that the book is going to be about the positive aspects of introversion. William Powers uses the seeming contradiction strategy in yet another way by creating an unlikely pair. Hamlet, the famous protagonist of one of Shakespeare's most famous plays, apparently owns a modern day electronic device. How can this be? What will Hamlet do with a Blackberry? The fact that we're asking these questions is evidence that the title works. Powers includes a subtitle as well to add a more informative layer to his title that ensures his readers know what the book is about: a practical philosophy for building a good life in the digital age. This subtitle explains how the book is relevant to our lives. Sherman Alexie brilliantly uses layered meanings in his seemingly simplistic title, Indian Killer. At first glance, the title seems rather basic and one dimensional, but it actually presents three different messages tied to the novel's central theme. The novel is about a serial killer in Seattle whom the media believe is a Native American because the victims are white and the killer leaves an owl feather as his calling card. As a result, the media names the killer the Indian Killer. This is the most literal meaning of Alexie's title. But if we look at the grammatical structure of the phrase, an Indian killer would actually be a killer of Indians, not an Indian who kills. So the title also comments on the ignorance of the media outlets and even suggests that they are wrong about who the killer is. Finally, the novel provides revisionary history of America, specifically pertaining to Native American history that is often ignored by white Americans. The novel also explores many ways that Euro American culture has killed Native American culture in the US, suggesting, in fact, that Indians are still being killed by whites through the erasure of their culture. Elephants on Acid uses the shock and awe strategy in presenting an idea that would likely seem surprising to readers. The rest of the title, and other bizarre experiments, provides some more informative details, so we know that the book is about scientific experiments or studies that are equally surprising. Let's look at some example titles that a student explored for an essay for a college level course. This student wrote a process essay on creative ways to deal with a roach problem. She struggled to come up with a title, so she brainstormed several different ideas. Her initial title was simply Roaches, but this title wouldn't likely make anyone too excited to read her essay. It's not even really that informative. What about roaches? We're not told. We don't have any idea. It could be a narrative about her pet roach. It could be a scientific article about the evolution of roaches. We're forced to rely on our own imagination, which isn't necessarily going to align with the goals of the writer's essay. So her second title, How to Kill a Roach, is certainly more informative, but it still isn't very intriguing or inspired. Her third try, Exterminating Roaches, essentially just says the same thing with a better vocabulary. As she begins to explore some of the strategies that we've talked about for creating more engaging titles, her titles start to get better. So next she tried taking some strong language from her introduction. Damn the roaches, damn them all. This one employs the shock and awe strategy. It definitely grabs a reader's attention better than the others. My favorite, though, was her last attempt. Roaches? Fork 'em. Since her essay is actually about killing roaches with a fork and a can of Lysol, it fits her content well. It also presents a play on another F word expression that some readers might find humorous. This allows her to imply strong language instead of using the explicit language that the previous title uses. This might help her avoid offending some of her potential readers. As you craft titles for your own essays, try employing some of these strategies to stimulate more creative thinking. You will be surprised what you can come up with a little effort.